Hello, welcome back. It's my pleasure to introduce Andrew Salais, who studies religious studies and philosophy at Arizona State University, and has been, but is no longer, I understand, the president of the ASU Secular Student Alliance, which is very relevant to his talk, which is about leadership transitions and delegation, something that we say a lot at the Secular Student Alliance at the headquarters is that organizing on campus is like organizing at a bus stop, because everybody is always coming and going all the time. So it's really excellent that you have chosen to participate in this talk, because this is a super, super important topic. In addition to doing cool things with the ASU Secular Student Alliance, Andre's also been involved in the LGBT organizing community at his campus and the Model United Nations. And done a lot of other cool things. One of those other cool things is that he has started a blog called unbelieversblog.com. And with no further ado, please join me in welcoming Andrew. Andre.
All right. Let's get this pinned on. Okay. And I know August wanted to make sure he got my last name pronounced correctly. My last name is spelled S-A-L-A-I-S, so it's like Salais, but pronounced Salais. So he did get the last name, but my first name is Andre. But I am impressed that you got the last name right. I usually just tell people to pronounce it however they want. It's typically easier that way. Unbelievers blog is now also Unbelievers Radio. We've moved to a radio and podcast program. So if you want to come participate in a live broadcast with Unbelievers Radio, that's going to be done at lunch tomorrow in somewhere. It's on the schedule, so you'll find it. You're more than welcome to join in. All right, so I've been involved with student organizations for a while now, so not just the Secular Student Alliance, but a couple of LGBT groups, Model United Nations, student government, all sorts of organizations. And in the various roles I had within student government, I was actually a part of helping groups transition when they had difficulty doing that, write their governing documents, things of that nature. So this is something that I'm pretty familiar with. Now, the take that I'm going to go with here is my view on how to approach a leadership transition properly. But there's a lot of great ideas out there and a lot of other leaders at this conference who can help you out with other ideas that might be better than mine. So lean on each other, use each other's best practices. That's going to be the best way to ensure that you're successful, is to look at this conference as a larger team. So this is all going to be very team oriented. We're also going to talk about delegation a little bit, and I'm going to try to roll it into the leadership transition focus. So it's not going to be the nitty-gritty of delegating, but more the larger picture of it and how it works from like transitioning to your next group of leaders. All right, so what constitutes a transition? This seems like it's something that's straightforward, but it is not your elections. Your elections just change who's at the top of the organization. There's a lot of nuts and bolts that come with running an organization that don't get passed on with an election. So your transitions, what they should be doing is aiming to prevent repeating mistakes made by previous officers. This is big. We all make mistakes and we can learn from each other. They should prepare your group for the next year, and they should improve your group's opportunities to succeed by working smarter and not harder. So the approach here, when going about transitioning leaders, should streamline growth, should streamline planning of events, and I put speakers in there because if you're planning out events well in advance, so over the summer, you're going to get the first pick of the speakers. When you contact the SSA and say, hey, we want these guys, you're the first folks to get the emails in. You're not going to have to worry about their availability as much as other groups are going to. So this is very, very important. And most of all, it encourages long-term stability. So if you make transitions a tradition, if you have it in your constitution, and this is something that you're committed to year after year after year, your groups are going to be stronger for it. All right, so what do we include in a transition? Well, one of the biggest obstacles is going to be the bureaucracy at your college or university, which often doesn't make any sense, much like this image here. This is oftentimes a brute force memorization issue. You just have to know who you have to talk to and what processes you have to go through. So this will require the boring stuff of explaining the forms, how they have to be filled out. Some universities are very, very specific on what they want on these forms. Deadlines, things of that nature. How far in advance do you have to have these forms submitted? You should be sharing contacts and relevant departments with your next leader. So who are they going to get in touch with? Who should they be baking those cookie bouquets for and buttering up in student services to get the things done that they need to get done? And facilities are also important. There are limitations to access to common goods at the university. Tables, space, limitations on how you can engage the public. And if you share this with the next year's leaders, their job is going to be a ton easier, way easier, because they won't have to stumble trying to figure out this stuff for themselves. All right, so the previous year's failures and successes. It's important to know when things can go wrong. So don't be overconfident. If others have failed, your chances of success are better. You should learn from their mistakes. Expect the previous year's institution problems to continue. They may not. You might have resolved some sort of communication issue with the institution, some sort of documentation issue, whatever it may be, but that doesn't mean it got fixed. Arizona State University, where I come from, has 75,000 students. It's easy for things to get lost. It's easy for people to forget to do stuff. Keep that in mind. We're all human. Last year's problems might continue to the next year. Don't wait until the last minute because you know what went wrong before. Still plan in advance because something else could potentially go wrong. And don't be afraid to admit that you don't know something. Plan in advance. So the do's, some of the more positive stuff. You should be doing this and failing at failing. This is our goal here. So ask about how failures were resolved when you're in your meetings with the previous year's officers. Take notes on streamlining required tasks. Like how do they eliminate the red tape? How do they make it as simple as possible to get this required stuff done? Listen to and ask about your predecessor's unresolved group running troubles. Not everything is going to get fixed. There's going to be some difficulties that your group is still going to be dealing with in the following year. But if you know what obstacles you're still facing when you take over the reins of your organization, you'll have a better chance of fixing those obstacles when you enter the new year. And again, plan in advance and learn from the mistakes of others. Now, that doesn't mean that we should ignore what we've done well. There's always opportunity for improvement. So take some time to go over the things that you've done well and emulate those. But seriously evaluate how you can make those things better. That's vital. If you have successful tabling events, for example, maybe tabling wasn't a problem for you. You do some great recruitment at tabling. Well, how can you make it more engaging? Maybe the people you had at the tables were the same people every time. Perhaps you didn't have a broad variety of opinions there. Maybe everyone was a philosophy major and they didn't rub the science majors well in the conversations. And they're like, have a mix. Not all atheists major in one thing. Not all atheists have one background. Have a variety of people. So improve on what you're already doing and definitely evaluate feedback you're getting from your members from the previous year. Just being leaders in the organization doesn't mean you know everything and what everybody wants. So your members will give you feedback. Take it seriously. Take the criticism seriously and run with it. All right. So let's talk about establishing the broad goals. So what's the mission for the next year? This isn't the nuts and bolts of what events do we want to do and stuff like that, but what is it in a broad sense that your group wants to be identified with and wants to accomplish? This should be the new team's vision. So if you are officers who are handing off the organization to a new leadership team, you have to be able to hand it off to the new leadership team. You are there as a consultant, not to control the outcome. Help them craft their vision. And then definitely look at how well the group served its members and how well it was serving the broader community. Were we too insular? Were we only serving a few interests? Did we have people who left because they didn't feel like it was welcoming to them? Talk about how you can improve that. And for those of you who are passing the torch to another group, let it go. It's important. Just relax, let it go, let the next group take over, and be there to advise or to consult or to answer questions. Just be a resource for them. The way you know your group is going to be successful down the road is if you can have successive transitions where there's no bloodshed, transitioning government without disaster, and it succeeds. It moves forward as if you weren't needed. That's a good thing. All right, so planning ahead. This is going to solve almost every problem you're going to come across. We talked about, we've already heard about burnout. We've heard about a lot of issues that come up in groups with the panel that was on earlier today. A poor plan is going to leave leaders and members unsure of the group's trajectory. That's a bad thing. You don't want people to lack confidence in the leadership of the group, and you don't want people to view the group as unstable because they're not going to be personally invested in it. It's going to harm your ability to get volunteers and to recruit members. That's a really bad thing. It hurts the group's public image. If you have poorly planned events, other groups might not want to participate. And again, this is going to hurt recruitment. Your members will become exhausted if they don't have a clear plan on what you essentially want to happen, what direction the group is going. And it'll leave your leaders in a constant panic mode. This will fuel burnout. And for the leaders who are in a situation where the bad planning has essentially put all of the responsibility for the group on their backs, it will harm your grades. And you may have to step away, and that could put the survival of the group in a really bad situation. So, this is your brain on bad planning. You don't want to feel like this cat. You will feel overwhelmed if you don't plan in advance. And there is a solution. Plan in advance. A good plan gets members excited because they know all the awesome stuff that the group wants to do. It also makes changing plans way easier. So if something goes wrong, if you've got a calendar laid out with all your tabling events and all of your speaking events, and you have ideas on where you want inter-club related events going, if something goes wrong and you need to change plans, you already know where your free space is. You already know where all of your tabling events are. Maybe you can shuffle things around because that's already planned out. There's none of this last minute, we need to completely build out a calendar for this month because something went wrong and it derailed everything. It allows you to adequately space out your preparation so you can adequately delegate. So if you know you've got an event coming up at the end of this month and then you've got a couple tabling events during the month, you can essentially, you have a trajectory, you know what's coming up, you can plan accordingly and split up the work and set deadlines that are reasonable and easy to achieve. When you have a plan in place, you don't have to worry about wondering how you're going to achieve it and then getting it all done at the last minute. It allows time for things to go wrong. It allows some time for self-care and focusing on your academics. So that is absolutely vital. When you plan ahead, you don't have to worry about burning out your members. And it builds confidence in the leadership and the stability of the group, which encourages retention. It encourages members to get more involved and take ownership of the group. And it encourages recruitment because they're excited. This group knows what it's doing. It looks like everyone's having a blast and they're doing incredible and amazing things. And it will also improve your college experience. So instead of remembering the SSA as something that destroyed your 4.0 GPA, this will be something that made your college experience wonderful, where you've accomplished amazing things, and if anything, it'll make it a de-stressor to help you do better academically. All right, so let's talk about building your calendar. I already mentioned speakers, so if you select them in advance during the summer, you're going to have a better chance of getting the speakers you want when you want them, but it also gives you time to ask for different speakers, maybe if the scheduling didn't work out. Build a fundraising schedule and plan. So have an idea on how you're going to pay the honorariums for these speakers, and plan out in advance. Know when you're going to do the fundraising and set goals for when you need to raise certain amounts of money. Schedule weekly meetings and social events. Get them on the calendar and make that calendar available online. And schedule tabling events at least bi-weekly. This includes recruitment, fundraising, awareness, and whatnot. Your plan should be specific enough that you have an estimate of the number of people you'll need. This is all stuff that you do in your transition meetings with your officers, with your new officers and the old officers. This will make their life way easier when you plan the whole year in advance. So let's get on to delegation. We accomplish more together, for one. So I don't so much like looking at it as delegation as much as I like looking at it as teamwork. It's an opportunity to be successful as a whole instead of having just a few people at the top of the organization taking all the glory for all the hard work that's being put in. So some quick pointers, and I'm going to reiterate these a couple times. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Your active members are there because they believe in the group and they want it to succeed. Let them contribute. Don't micromanage, because this will make them not want to contribute at all. Give them the freedom they need to be able to create on their own. But don't undermanage either. If you say, I need a flyer for this event, but there's specific things that are being covered in the event, or you want it to be pitched in a certain way, they're going to come back with a flyer that might be completely not what you wanted. Like, set some minimum parameters so that they know, like, they have an idea of what to do, what you want accomplished. And be open to disagreement. Just because we are leaders in the organization doesn't mean we have all the great ideas. Other people might have better ideas, and some of our best ideas might come through discussing disagreement with others. Teams accomplish more. This is obviously a fundraising image. All right. So one thing I would recommend, I know not everyone would recommend this, and this would be probably best for big universities. You could roll these responsibilities into someone else's job title in your constitution if it's a smaller university, but consider having a volunteer coordinator. There's a benefit to this. Your events are going to be fully staffed because you have one person who's focusing on volunteers. You'll have time to staff when some volunteers can't make it, because someone's job is to make sure that all the volunteers can make it and they can replace them. You'll have people to delegate to. If you have someone who's responsible for finding out who wants to volunteer for what when they're signing up to be members, like what they're interested in, this person can make sure that they're assigning tasks out according to people's interests, and they'll have a list of people who might be willing to do stuff. Let's see. Another advantage to this is you're going to give members opportunities to lead and contribute. You're going to encourage ownership of the club by offering ownership of the work. And as a result, you create a larger pool of experienced members who have an investment in the club and who may want to be officers later. That's another big thing for leadership transitions, is if you don't have any leaders to transition to, your club's kind of in a bad spot. Encourage developing experience and ownership of the club. You'll have people run for office and you'll be able to help transition better. All right, so let's talk about communication for just a couple minutes, since that's what we've got left. All right, so this is incredibly important, and this is something that often gets neglected when we're talking about delegating and transitioning. Learn how the new officers coming in and how your volunteers prefer to be communicated to. Some prefer very direct communication. Some want it to be softer, maybe a little slightly sugar-coated. I don't mean that in a bad way, but they might not want, hey, I need this done at this time, and done, and then go away. Some people are really receptive to that. Others aren't. They want a more detailed explanation. Set clear parameters. Again, make sure they know what you want done, and be open to repeating yourself and to rephrasing things to clarify. I know some of us who have more of the CEO kind of personality, repeating ourselves is one of our biggest frustrations. Deal with it. If you need to clarify, if they're asking for clarification, one, thank them for asking for that clarification, because that ensures the job is going to get done better, and then offer clarification. And don't set overly strict parameters. You will stifle creativity, and this will mean you're not going to get as good a product. All right, so successful delegation. Ask, don't tell. Make sure that the person you have in mind actually wants to do it. Now, I have in parentheses something important up there. This can be difficult if we're talking about an officer, because sometimes the tasks that the officers have to do aren't, I want to do this, it's mandatory. The officers are going to be stuck in a situation where they just have to do things, and there's not really much that they can do about that if they're leading the group. But they volunteered for that position, that's the one that they want, and when you become an officer, you understand not everyone's going to agree. You're not going to get everything you want all the time. Make sure they're able to do the task. So don't just assume that they have the ability to do it. Ask if they've got the time. And don't let them burn out. If they're working too hard, don't assign it to them. You might have to say no if they're volunteering for stuff all the time. Respond to questions and feedback favorably. And thank them for accepting the task. Remind them that their work is appreciated. This is vital. Thank your team. Their work should be appreciated and they deserve to be recognized. If you're delegating, chances are this work is ultimately your responsibility. The people you're delegating to are making your life easier, and they're an important part to helping your group succeed. And one last thing on recognition, some people don't want to be recognized in front of the whole group, so maybe an email or just like talking to them and saying, hey, great work, might be enough. It's a communication thing. Learn how they want to be communicated to. So this was short, but if you have any questions, there's my email address. I'm happy to answer any questions. If I can be of any assistance, feel free to contact me. All right, 20 minutes.